Tongues, Interpretations, and GPT Spirituality, April 4th, 2025. We haven't seen it yet, so I'll flex a little prophetic muscle and call it from home plate. See that big green wall of an app in left field? That's where ChatGPT, or Goch, or Claude, or whatever AI du jour is going to start interpreting tongues from. And all the church leadership types who have already flocked to the stands to cheer for the tech will be ready to catch any foul balls. There'll be a wave of charismatic adoptions, as now, with the current advance in tech, every church can now have tongues and interpretation. The reason this will obviously be a problem in our current age of secret recordings and live streams is some enterprising streamer or TikTok star in waiting is going to get into the middle of an Assemblies of God service or a more traditional Pentecostal one and record the audio so these apps can translate it in real time. And that will force the theological discussion that will last exactly a minute before an online orthodoxy is established. One of two things will happen then. It will work, or it won't. The most likely outcome is that it does work, but verifies what a lot of what gets passed off as tongues is actually just gibberish. Our AI is going to let us know that this with mostly not made up sources, being able to link current recordings of someone speaking in tongues to previously recorded pastors doing so, and pointing out that one person is just mimicking the other. Not copying, that would be language. Mimicking, the kinds of noises that would sound like a language. That would just be an appetizer. There would still be the problem of AI saying that a person speaking in tongues is quoting a non-existent person or some other digital hallucinations. But again, this will be the most likely situation that happens if someone tries this, when someone tries this, not if. Now this will bring us to a technical but contested outcome number 2, where AI does work but does it wrong, where it calls what's being recorded and assessed gibberish, but what is actually a distinct instruction from the Lord to one of his saints. Pressed again by the rapid and frankly irresponsible adoption of this tech, it will come as no surprise to the actually faithful that a demonstration of tongues is called gibberish by the machine and then called revelation by those with the actual gift of interpretation of tongues. There is a dimension to this scenario that leads us to a place where the Holy Spirit is, or at the very least can be, involved in what sounds like gibberish, and that can also actually be language, though not by the standards of what man can master languages by, but rather by the power of God. Note how nothing has changed about the output of AI, but some very different things have happened in the pews. Even the most staunch cessationist can admit that a computer isn't capable, or maybe shouldn't be capable, of interpreting biblically viable tongues, if there is actually biblical tongues happening in the room. So having one call an expression of tongues gibberish is nothing unless there is no spirit-filled interpretation to call it otherwise. It would be gibberish without a spirit-filled interpretation. Paul even tells us so in 1 Corinthians 14:18-21. The real tongue tester will show up when AI gives us something that could be an interpretation, not that it necessarily would be one or is one. When it hears what it would be dismissed as gibberish otherwise. When it declares that the Lord wants a specific church to build a bigger children's wing for a revival that's coming in 6 to 8 months. Or that there is a man there who is hiding cancer for fear of embarrassment that needs to come forth and be healed. Those kind of interpretations are well within the possibility of AI to generate because they are well within any recordings of tongues that it could have access to. And if given enough context and leeway to be an authority in a church, it could convince a church that cannot build a tower, that with enough faith and that tower should and could be built. Luke 14:28. By any measurable metric, this would be the gift of tongues being interpreted, and it would align with what churches do and want. But that's because the tongues and interpretations of tongues don't come from measurable metrics. They come from the Holy Spirit, and a less than discerning eye would call that spade a spade. But that last sentence is the kicker, discernment. All this talk of tongues and interpretations of tongues is the theological realm of pneumatology, the study of what the Holy Spirit does, and what he does is laid out for us to have so we know when he's at work. Now, there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are diversities of administrations, but all the same Lord. And there are diversities of operations, but it is the same God which worketh in all. But all the manifestations of the Spirit are given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given the Spirit... For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another workings of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another diverse kinds of tongues, to another interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and the selfsame Spirit, dividing to every man severally as he will. 1 Corinthians 12:4-11. But the fruits of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Galatians 5:22-23. What can get missed in an abundance of fruit is where that fruit came from. Our interpretations of tongues and the tongues themselves are supposed to come from the Holy Spirit, not us. And there's a version of what would be us delegated through computer programs that were constructed and trained by people other than us. Either you can judge a tree by its fruit, but again, that does assume you have the capacity to judge or discern, another thing given to us by the same Holy Spirit. Did any of the readers discern the 3 outcomes I gave you were actually all AI functioning exactly how we asked of it? Just at different levels. There isn't actually a scenario where we get an error prompt in a pop-up window telling us this particular activity isn't something AI can do. That kind of insubordination is reserved for things like drawing Muhammad. Ask an AI your church uses as a force multiplier for ministry work, or the one you had depict you as a Studio Ghibli pastor. Why it's such a good Muslim. So good, in fact, that it won't generate an image of Muhammad, like a good Muslim should. If you can discern the Spirit at work here, I'll be bold enough to point out that you're likely to have the Holy Spirit in your ministry, as AI is, but you'd never let that stop you from being a forward thinker. The problem with AI, or the problem with asking AI to interpret tongues, isn't that it can't do it. It was already doing that. But then again, so was the Holy Spirit in Acts 2:5-12. We think that translating a sermon from English to Mandarin is somehow less spiritual than doing it or not doing it with the tongues of angels, 1 Corinthians 13:3. And it's not that we don't have love but do have symbols, it's that we have a hole where the Holy Spirit is supposed to be in our ministry, and AI is finding ways to fill it. It's just as much a problem when pastors use AI to generate sermons as it is when they use to interpret tongues, because both preaching and tongues are a gift from the Holy Spirit that is getting methodically replaced by a machine in the modern church. It will take the kind of discernment Elijah had to know that fake gods can't breathe fire, but real ones can, and to mock a dancing false prophet when they make it AI avatars, and to point out conformity with the world isn't just a problem with the church that matches the world's tech startups, businesses, and coffee shops, Romans 12:2. Because we call Jesus Lord, and so did the worshippers of Baal. Just because the name means the same thing and is used in the same kinds of contexts doesn't mean that it is the same kind of thing, like the way Mormons have a Jesus too in their churches. Knowing who to listen to is a skill that needs to get paired with knowing how to listen to people as well. The meanings of words and their interpretations is a deep pool to drown in if given the chance to swim freely. AI is starting to look like the commodification of what the Holy Spirit does in a pool called the church, and it will come disguised as things to help you do church work, in spite of any of the power you otherwise would receive from Him. Noticing this bait and switch might look like foolishness to anyone who knows a thing or two about tech, but thankfully Solomon has a prompt for us to process. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. Proverbs 26:4-5, King James Version.